Hello, everybody. Welcome to Self-Taught Dev Tutorials. This is Paulo, and today we are going to discuss on how to send multiple emails from a Google spreadsheet. Now, this is the second video of our AppScript tutorial series, and this is more of a real-life scenario where you may want to send emails coming from a spreadsheet, and Google AppScript will be able to help you achieve this task. Let's get started. So we have this data in our spreadsheet, and we want to send customized emails using the values from column A to column F. And once we have sent the emails, we want to tag column G for the status of the email. So let's go ahead and write our scripts. So let's go to Tools, and then Script Editor. Now this will create a container-bound script. If you don't know what a container-bound script is, or you want to know the types of Google Apps Scripts, you can check out my first video titled What is Google Apps Script, which is included in the description below. So let's name this project Send Multiple Emails. And let's delete this default function. And let's create our own, which we will name Send Emails. Now this function will be the main function and will be responsible in sending all the emails. So first let's get our active spreadsheet and store it in a variable. So we will call this variable SS, or short for spreadsheet. And let's call our spreadsheet app service and get the active spreadsheet. The next value, or the next variable, will be our sheet variable, and all we need to do is just call the spreadsheet variable and then get the active sheet. So the next variable will be sheet values, which will be the values of this sheet. Okay, so let's call the sheet variable and then call the get data range method. The get data range method will get all the values or all the cells in the sheet that has values. Okay, and then for us to get the values, then let's call get values. For us to check if we are getting the data we need, so let's try to log it. Let's log sheet values, save, and then let's run the function by clicking the play icon. Just make sure that you have the right function that you would like to run. In our case, we don't need to choose anything because we have just one. And we need to authorize it. So this will authorize the script and then run the function. And let's check the logs. Here you can see that we are able to get all the values coming from this sheet. So this will return a two-dimensional array. If you want to know more about arrays, JavaScript objects, there's a lot of tutorials out there that you can check out, but we will not cover that in this video. So okay, so the sheet variable, or the sheet values variable, is just storing all the rows or the values from these rows. Okay, and now what we need to do, the next step is we need to loop through each row in this variable and then send the email. So we can use the for loop, and let's call it I equals 0, and then I is less than sheet values dot length plus plus. Okay. So we will name a variable here called row, which will store each row that we will be looping through. So this will store the row. So sheet values I represents each row. So if you want to check it out, let's try to log it. Let's log the row, then run the function. So as you can see, we are getting each row in the logs. So this first log here is actually the column headers, which is this. The second one is row, this is row 2, which is this, and so on. Okay, so get values actually returns a two-dimensional array. If you want to know more about arrays or JavaScript objects, there's a lot of tutorials out there that you can check out, but we will not cover that in this video. So let's move on. Let's create a variable to get the value of the sender name, or the value in column A. Now for us to get that, we can just call the row variable, since we already have the values, all the values in each row in this variable. So let's name this variable sender name. And for us to get the value in this column, column A, we can call row and then access the index 0, because in JavaScript we are counting from 0, especially for arrays or loops. You start your count in from 0. So this will be, column A will be 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, and when we loop through each row, the count is the same. So here we said let I equal 0. That means that let's start from the count of 0, which is row 1. So row 1 is actually counted 0. The row 2 will be 1, and then row 3 will be 2, and then so on. Okay? So sender name will be row 0, which is row 1, and then its index 0, which is this, column A. Okay, so for us to check that, let's log it. Let's see if you are getting the values. Let's run the function. As you can see here, so the first, we are getting the correct values then. So sender name is the value here in row 1, column A. And then self-dev tutorials, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So that means we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So we are looping through the correct column. Okay, so next variable, we want to get the subject column, the values in the subject column, or in column B. So let's call that variable subject. And now let's again access the row variable, and then what should be the index here? That should be 1, right? Because this is 0, 1. Okay, and then the next variable will be our carbon copy, or our CC field, which is column C, which will be, let's call that CC, and which will be row 2. And then the next one will be our reply to column, which is column D. So let's just name it reply to, and then row, column, or index 3. Sorry, that's index 3. Okay, the next variable will be our email. So our email is going to be row 4. The next one will be our email body, which is column F, and that's going to be row 5. I mean, row index 5. Email body, that will be row 5. Okay. Okay, so now we will be creating another function called send email for us to send the email because we already have all the data we need. So let's create the function. Function is send email, and your send email function will be taking in or will be accepting some parameters. The parameters will be first, that will be sender name. We also need the CC field, the subject, the reply to, of course the email address, and then the email body. So in this function, we will be using a try-catch block. So this will allow us to return custom values in any case that we will have um, errors when sending the email. Okay, so let's use that. So in the try block, let's try to send the email. So we will be using mail app service, and let's use this method, which will be accepting a recipient, subject, body, and options. Okay, so for the recipient parameter, we will pass in our email parameter from the main function. And then the subject will be the subject, the body will be your email body. And then for the options, options will be an object with some properties. I will include the link of the mail app service for your reference in the description. So here we have a sender name. Since we have the same naming convention with our parameters, let's just copy and paste that. And then we also have the reply to, and then the CC field. Okay. So this function will actually send the email. And once we send the email, we want to return a status message. So we want to have the status message will have a date. So for us to have a date, we will be utilizing the utility service of Google Apps Script. So let's name this date, and then utilities dot format date. We will use this method because this will allow you to format a certain date in a format that you want. So the date parameter will be just a date instance. So new date will return the current date, and then the time zone will be, on my end, it's going to be GMT plus 08. And the format, a format for me, let me do like month, date, and full year, plus the hour, the minutes, and if it's AM or PM. Okay. And then here we return the message or the status message. So I will be returning, I will say return email sent, because in the try block, if it's successful, we will return email sent. And then let's concatenate the date by using a plus sign here. So string and then plus, your variable, the date. Let's just add a hyphen there. This one. Okay. And then in any case that we get an error when we try to run this, run this block here, then let's return the error message. Error.message. Okay. So now that we have our send email function, we can use that in our main function inside the for loop so that we can send emails while we are looping through the rows. Okay. So let's store this function in a variable. So let's call it send email to customer, and then let's call our send email function. And since we have the same naming convention of the variables here with the parameters we had set, let's just copy and paste. Okay. So the last step we have is we need to set whatever value, which will be this email status that will be stored in this variable. We want to set that in column G, which is the status column. And we want to dynamically set the values as we go through the loop. Okay, so for us to do that, we need to call the sheet variable again, and then use the method getRange. There's a lot in there, but we will be using the third one, which will have 4 parameters. And the first parameter is the start row. Okay, so the start row, where do you want the range or the start row where you want to, in this case, set the value. So for example, in row 2, this is where we want to set the value. Then we should enter the number 2 in this parameter. However, in our case, we don't want to hard code it because, as again, we are looping through the rows. So we want to dynamically get the row and set the value into that row. So in this case, we want to use our I variable because that's our count in the for loop. Okay, but take note, the I variable will have an offset value because, again, as we have explained earlier, we are starting our count from 0. So in this case, we just need to add 1. Okay, and by the way, before I forget, let's change this to 1 because we don't want to start our loop in from our column headers. We don't want to include our column headers in the for loop. So this means that, hey, please start your loop from row 2 and just forget about row 1. All right, so let's start from 1 instead of 0, and then let's go back to our getRange function. So here the next parameter is the column number, and it's also the start column where you want to set the value in our case. So here we want to set it in column G, and the column number of column G should be 7. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so here we can hard code it because it's gonna be a fixed column here. We don't have a loop in this section, so it's fine. So we can hard code that for this tutorial. It's okay. And then the next parameters will be the number of rows to return. So how many number of rows, or how many rows would you like us to return? In our case, we just want our code to just return one value or one row, because here every time we loop, we just set it to a specific row, and we don't want to return multiple rows because that's gonna like have bad data in here. Okay, so we just need to have one return row. And then the last parameter will be the number of columns to return. So again, you may guess it correctly, we also just need to return one column, okay? Because we only want to set the value in column G, okay? And then the last method we need to call in this chain is get or set value, okay? So let's set the value of this variable, which is the send email to customer. Okay, so sheet.getRange, and then set the value or our email message to this range. Okay. Okay, so we're all set, and we can check and test our function. So let's try to run this function and see if the emails will be sent. So let's do that. So it will ask for authorization again because you are using the mail app service here, which has different set of scopes. So if you see this, again, if you see this notification, that is fine because this is just required if you need to share or publish your project to the public. But for now, this is okay. So just go to send multiple emails, and then click allow. Okay, so that ran the function successfully. And let's see if we did receive the email and if the emails were sent. So it shows here that all the emails were sent successfully. And let's check my inbox because I was CC'd to the emails. Okay, so we did receive the emails here with the custom content, subject 1, recipient 1. That will be subject 1 and recipient 1 for the greetings. And same with hello recipient 2, hello recipient 2, and it was sent to recipient 2 at mailbox T. Okay, recipient 2 at mailbox T. Okay, so I think the function ran successfully. Um, so that's it for this tutorial. Please like and subscribe, and happy coding.